I'm Mark Small, Civil Discourse Now. It is August 6th, 2022. Okay. A couple of weeks ago, there was a convention here of red pill people. One of the spokespeople for which said we can take control of this country, basically 15 to 17% of the people. What? What does that have to do with anything? One basic premise of government in this country, as I've learned it, is you convince the other side, you convince people who are listening that you're right. And it's a vote at the end that determines who's right. You know, they've shut that out. And so what we have is people saying that Jesus Christ is the premise for our government, even though we aren't a theocracy. One of the ministers locally has gun range training for people in their church. That's refreshing, I guess. But overall, Indiana has become more of a repressive place than it has been before. Now, realize Indiana has had these periods in our past when our Constitution was being discussed in 1850 and 1851. Even though the Constitution begins with the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, people argued against that because they didn't want there to be the impression that slaves who were escaping the South were welcome here. Now, Indiana is one of the places along the Underground Railroad where slaves could seek refuge and escape the southern states and the slave states, not all of which were southern. Kentucky was right across the river from Indiana. Kentucky was not a southern state, had not joined the Confederacy. But we had people in the state didn't really want to welcome former slaves. You get to the 1920s, and the Ku Klux Klan was established here as a social club, more or less, that terrorized people on the side. And that's rather disturbing, especially when you consider that the head of the Klan for the state, D.C. Stevenson, said he was the law. I am the law in Indiana. The only reason he lost power was because he was convicted of murder of a woman. I don't know if that would happen today. But if we fast forward to today, with the United States Supreme Court, we have a Supreme Court that's an aberration. This court will be compared to the Tawney Court of the 1850s that said Dred Scott was okay, that said people who are black aren't equal to people who are white. We looked at that court as a stain on our history. And I think if you look at the Roberts Court, or some call it the Trump Court, the justices that were loaded onto it have ignored precedent and have gone on with a specific ideological objective. Now, what's the outcome for Indiana? And Indiana is the example because I live here. See, we're encouraging people not to come here. I saw people on the internet saying, if you're a college student thinking about going to school at a college, don't come here. I'm an alum of DePauw University. I'm proud of my alma mater. If people are thinking about coming here, go to school at DePauw. Don't. Whether a male or a female or non-binary, however one defines oneself, you're going to be in an environment where you don't have equality of medical treatment. You don't have a right to make a decision about your own medical condition or state or treatment or whatever. Now, let me point out and I'll say things that are rather vindictive, I guess, when the Reverend Billy Bob decides that a fetus is a human being. That's one thing. But people who look at everyday conditions and their own medical decisions, people who are well educated, people who run the businesses of this state, people who run the universities of this state. Well, Eli Lilly now is saying it won't expand here in Indiana. It's a major employer here in Indianapolis. What are you going to do for that, Billy Bob? You're going to have some kind of NASCAR figure eight jam up car thing? I don't think so. We have Gen Con. A lot of nerds getting together for comic book stuff. They're trying to figure out how to get out of a contract that binds them to 2026. And I'd say they're probably going to have several different ways to do it. And guess what? Indiana is probably going to pay for litigating for these idiots that have decided that we're going to ban abortion across the board. When Roe versus Wade was handed down in 1973, that marked a point at which women were protected finally. And no, the cells that are pre any kind of form in one's body, not a human being yet, hadn't been recognized as being human beings in most societies and most religions ever. They used you, Billy Bob. You might be getting people in on your church. But people wanting to manipulate people on the far right by saying, hey, let's use abortion. You don't have to worry about it. Because see, you can argue that those fetuses, those unborn human beings, have rights. Once they're born, you don't have to worry about it at all. They're on their own. Screw them. That's the attitude of the Republican Party today, this iteration of the Republican Party. So you've been manipulated. Congratulations. Now, what are you going to do for income? People are going to be leaving states that don't recognize women's rights to make their own decisions on their health care. I think that it's a really sad time we got. And I think that we had separation of church and state. We're supposed to still. Of course, I think that that's being kind of tossed to the wayside by this court. I think that there'd be an argument that people who wrote the Constitution would have with what this court has done. I'm Mark Small, Civil Discourse Now. It's August 6th, 2022. It's hot here in Indiana. And I hope things get better. Kansas gives us hope. Gives us a lot of hope. Peace, love, happiness, freedom, none and none will be. The force be with you always. Take care.